Okay, quantum healer, Vanessa Elston. I didn't ask if I pronounced that last name correctly. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. How does quantum resonance work?
Well, I'm not a quantum scientist, and this stuff all sounds terribly complicated. But the way quantum resonance works is that you can make things, you can influence things by certain types of energy. So, for instance, if I want to have a really good interview with a job, let's say, I have to imagine doing the job already, having a great interview and being really happy and relaxed while I'm there. And then I'm influencing the outcome. And with things like I'm, working with the inventor of this quantum card, it's covered in tiny holograms, which are all programmed to the frequency of harmony. So if I wave this over a cup of water, tap water, just like this, then the resonance of the frequency of harmony will influence the water in my cup and return it to its most natural, pure, harmonic state. So restructured water is really good for you because it is pure and we are 70% water. So that's the best way I can explain it, really, because I'm not a scientist.
Okay. How do you figure out the frequency of a person? Do you need to know exactly the frequency, or people's frequency similar, or is it different for everyone?
Oh gosh, we're all completely unique. So everyone's giving off, and they proved this in quantum physics. They call it the morphogeneric field. We're all giving off this level of energy. We're sort of surrounded by it. And we all know that people give off different levels of frequency. Some people bound in, they're really smiley. You feel great being around them because they're really positive. Everything that they comes out of their mouth is positivity, and with that comes creation of good things. And we equally know what it's like if a moaner comes in and you open the front door and it's like, how are you? And they're like, oh God, this terrible car journey. I'm feeling, really under the weather, and everything's negative. It brings your own energy down. So that's how resonance can work negatively. And the thing that people don't realize is you can up your energy because you really want to be on high frequency. That's where the good stuff happens, because that's where the law of attraction kicks in.
Okay. So the idea of a positive mental attitude definitely helps because it's affecting your resonance or your frequency with the world around you and people around you.
That's right. Because if you think about, when people say to me, oh, this all sounds a bit odd, I just say, well, look, if you think about it, there is a universal power that's controlling everything. If you look at the world of nature, for instance, plants aren't scratching their heads, feeling worried about how they're going to grow. They just need sun, water, decent soil, and they're off. And I think the best example of that is weeds coming through your patio. I mean, we do everything we can to kill them off, don't we? Burn them, poison them, weed whack them, whatever. But they are programmed to survive no matter what. They can come up through 10 tons of concrete through the tiniest crack, survive and thrive. So for anyone listening, that should really tell you that there is a universal power that, if you can tap into it, will support you positively. And it works on like reflection. So if you're miserable and you're putting out misery, you're going to get more misery because the universe just reflects what you're putting out. Whereas if you're going around loving stuff, I love people that say, you know, what do you think about this? And they go, oh, I love it. I love the taste of chocolate ice cream. They're really enthusiastic. Then the universe goes, oh, here's somebody that's really loving life. Let me give them more things about life to love. And to answer your question, when I'm working, when my clients come to see me, I tune into their energy. That's my gift. And I have a set of maps. I mean, my gift is to lift people out of anxiety and depression. So, people suffering from PTSD, obviously anxiety and depression, people with suicidal thoughts, people going through horrible divorces, all that sort of thing. And what I do is find out what it is, that negative energy that's trapped so deeply that it's influencing everything else, that it's sort of, think about negative energy, it just grabs onto anything else negative and it keeps being fed and it gets bigger and bigger. So you might find that somebody's incredibly successful CEO, they might be worth millions, but deep down, they never feel good enough. And it stops them enjoying all the fruits of their labor. And they end up being really anxious and depressed. And that's when they come and see me as the last resort, thinking, they'll say things like, it's the last resort, it probably won't work, all sounds a bit woo woo, not sure I believe it. And then 3 days after I've seen them, I'll get a wonderful message saying, I don't know what you've done, but I feel lighter and I've slept really well for the first time in however long, So I would say to people about all this stuff that's a bit out there, why not give it a go? Because none of it's got any side effects. The worst thing that can happen is nothing, which is quite rare. Really, I've never had nothing happen with my clients. I've always had a positive effect.
Yeah, there are great examples I find in nature of explaining certain things or explaining more complex philosophies or senses that we don't readily find available. Like the weeds growing thing reminds me of more of the Eastern philosophy of you just, or maybe more Stoic too, don't expect anything or lower your expectations or accept what you have, where that doesn't sound like a recipe for happiness, but think about what your garden or your yard would look like if you accepted that the weeds were beautiful and natural and then you didn't have to fight them, you just went with them. And I often think about those and go, I wonder who decided that this is something that you don't want in your yard versus something that you do want. Like a regular flower is just a different type of plant, a weed is just a plant, so you just have to accept that plant on its terms, I guess, and then find the joy in living with it.
Yeah, because we are surrounded by people. We're not going to get on with everybody. We all walk into rooms, might just not like somebody for no reason at all. You just don't like their energy, you don't want to be near them. That person is not for you. Doesn't mean you have to dislike them, doesn't mean you have to argue with them or create drama. Just quietly turn away. Don't engage. Be polite and just don't go with it, because we're all connected and people are lessons to you. Some people are gentle lessons, they gently encourage you. Some people are really harsh, their words stick with you for a long time, but they make you look at yourself very quickly, very closely and critically, because we're not always right. We are sometimes in the wrong. And getting rid of your ego and admitting that perhaps you didn't behave in the best way is the only way that you can grow. So, you do have to accept that everybody's different. You might not get on with them. But something I do have to pick you up on there is no, don't lower your expectations. In fact, make them bigger. Make them as big as you possibly can. Because what you want the universe to deliver, and people talk about manifestation, people come to me and they go, I've manifested my backside off. I've got the vision board. I've been meditating, been doing this. It's like, you know what? You're trying too hard. What you've got to do is, if you want the £1 million house or the multi-million pound house, it's not about the house. It's about what you're going to do when you get there. How good is it going to feel to wake up in that house every morning and have that amazing view of the ocean? You know, that's what you've got to concentrate on because you're creating. We have the ability to create, but we let fear get in the way. You know, turn on the news and it'll wipe out all your aspirations with fear of the economy, fear of war, fear of immigration. You know, it really stops you being positive and carrying on with that creation because what we want to do is put it out there to be as big as we can so it's beyond our expectation. You know, I'm working on a really big project at the moment, and when I started, I had no idea how on earth I was going to pull it off, but I knew what the end result was going to be. You know, what I wanted the end result to be. So I didn't worry about how or who was going to help me. I just imagined the end result over and over again. And eventually, the right people showed up with the right intentions, who understood what I wanted to achieve and got on board. And, you know, we're full steam ahead at the moment. It's really exciting. I can't tell you too much about it because I'm under NDA, but, you know, that's what you can do if you just don't worry about the nitty gritty. You know, don't worry about who's going to look after the kids when you're in that holiday. Don't worry about how you're going to afford to put the petrol in the car once you get your Maserati. Think about driving it.
Hmm. How does the universe look differently upon people that have the higher expectation versus the more philosophically stoic of no expectation?
Well, it's two different energies, as I've already said, you know, no expectation. It's like in England, some people, when you say to them, hey, how are you? They go, oh, not so bad. Well, you know, it's like, that's really like brought my energy down. You know, I have people that go, hey, I'm great. How are you doing? You know, it's nice and bouncy and light. We're enjoying life. We're enjoying being here. And, you know, I always think of us as being elements of God on the physical plane. And he wants to have a good time. He doesn't want us to be miserable or dour. And, you know, that means you're attached to ultimate power. So, what's actually stopping you having big expectations? Is it society? Is it your mum always told you not to expect too much? Mine did. You know, I don't know where you get these grand ideas from, Vanessa. I don't know why you think that you would ever achieve that or you would deserve it. But, you know, I've been really anxious and depressed. I used to be a hard ass businesswoman. It made me really ill. And I hit rock bottom, the really black bottom of the pit. And now I've bounced out and I've achieved that. And I do the work that I do and I help other people make that shift. I wake up every day really joyful. And because of that, great things happen to me all the time, even down to getting great parking spaces. I live in a medieval town where for every parking space that you pay for, 8 other people have paid for that space. So it's really frustrating to try and park. But I can park outside my house every day because I believe I will. And miraculously, every time I rock up, a car will just pull out and I'll be able to get in. So, you know, when you're on the good foot, good stuff happens.
What do you think then the reason for our existence here is?
I think we've got to enjoy ourselves as much as we can. I think we've got to be as creative as we can. I also think that we have a lot of lessons to learn. You know, nobody I know that is incredibly successful hasn't gone through huge suffering. So never be jealous of somebody who on the surface has got everything because you never know what they've been through to get there. I mean, I'm working with somebody at the moment who's a multi-billionaire and he used to be a heroin addict living on the street. So, you know, only through that darkness Was he able to not just step into the light, but leap into it without fear because of what he'd overcome?
So then does spiritual healing, does that have the same thing to do with like a spiritual awakening?
Well, I think spiritual awakenings just when you decide that you want to know more, that there is more, that you have a innate feeling that what's around you isn't really the whole story. And that's when you'll probably start listening to podcasts like mine, when we have healers and spiritual workers on, or you might listen to quantum scientists and start joining the two up. But it's when you reach a point in your life where well, for me, it was when I said, I'm really unhappy and ill, and there has to be more to life than this. I've tried the rat race, working 14 hours, making a lot of money, not having balance in my life, and it made me ill and miserable. So, what's the alternative? And I think that's the awakening. But spiritual healing is when, well, in my instance, I'm able to go into somebody's energy field and say, what's holding you down? What's that weight? Let's get rid of it. And it's like that, gone. And you start to feel better almost immediately. Now, other healers and other practitioners will have other modalities where they might look at what's in your past life that you've brought over to this life that's haunting you. I mean, there's lots of modalities, but the thing I'd say to anybody is book a discovery call, check people's websites, look at their testimonials, look at their social media, because we are an unregulated profession. And I'm very sad to say that there are some charlatans out there that prey on vulnerable people. And what I'd say to anybody is anyone who's good doesn't want to see you for 6 months. I say to my clients, you might be on the floor with anxiety and depression right now, but I want you gone in, 6 weeks. I love you to bits, but I don't want you hanging around. So I want to shift you out of where you are now to a much better place as quickly as I possibly can. And they're the healers that you should be trusting. It's your vulnerability, really. You have to make sure people have real integrity.
So then is changing your frequency or your vibration, I guess that's the same thing, is that's just something that you just have to make your mind up to do and you can do it immediately? Is it like a forward momentum or a momentum in any direction of a certain frequency and then you have to get that energy off and then build the other up, or is it just switch it? You just have to decide to switch it.
You just decide to switch it up. So instead of waking up and thinking, oh my God, another day, I hate my job, why don't you wake up and say, hey, I've got full movement? Because when I was ill, I woke up one day, I couldn't move at all, nothing. It's terrifying. So I say to everyone, when you get out of bed with ease tomorrow, be grateful for that. Because a lot of people, particularly after COVID, long COVID, can't do that. Thank God that you can breathe clearly. If you can go running without collapsing, wow. Do you know what I mean? Be really grateful for that. Open your fridge and be grateful that you've got food in there. Just start being grateful instead of miserable. Laugh at everything, even the bad stuff. I had a terrible day yesterday. Awful. I got my house back that I've been renting because I've been away. And it was in an appalling state. Let's just leave it there. And I was so upset. And I went round to see a friend of mine and we had a cup of tea and we swore a lot. And I ranted because people think people like me, we're just constantly happy. Bad stuff happens to us too. It's about how long you stay on the down and how quickly you can get rid of it and make it not matter. So I had a cup of tea with my friend, used some choice, really bad words because I find that some swear words have amazing get rid of energy. It's like out. We laughed our heads off. She reminded me that nobody had died and I was really lucky to own a house and to get over myself. And we laughed at the fact that she was so frank. And I drove home in a completely different place. We made it just not matter.
So when you have your positive energy or a person has positive energy, does it help to confront negative energy with a visualization of it? And that, like, I guess it's different with different people, but would that help explain to yourself how you can keep your energy the way it is and try to go around theirs or get away from it or try to change it? Do you look at people and visualize energies then?
Well, if I walk into a room, I can tell who's a happy soul and who isn't. And I'm very sensitive. So I don't want to be around negative people. I don't want to be around people that just point out all the bad things that they've read in the paper that morning. I want to be around people that say, "What a beautiful day. Sun shining in England. What a surprise. Isn't it lovely?" I want them to be talking about good things. Did you hear about so-and-so? Won the lottery the other day. Isn't that amazing? Friends, my plumber recently won £100,000. I think you guys call them RVs. We call them camper wagons. And he's off touring Europe. How amazing is that? Get off on other people's successes, because then you attract success to yourself. It's like, just keep upping your frequency all the time. And quantum always moves forward, and energy works in ripples. So if someone's just putting out negative, just don't engage that much. Turn away. Someone puts their fists up for a fight, don't put yours up verbally or physically, because if you do, you're going to get a fight. Just turn away or start smiling. Ask them why they're being so dramatic. Well, perhaps not like that, but you might actually cause a fight. But do you see what I'm getting at? It's like, you have to stop being defensive and aggressive. You've got to start being more generous of spirit in order to attract good things into your life.
How do you deal with the overwhelmingly bad that maybe you keep your frequency, I said that weird, frequency higher, and you have the positive mental attitude, and then there's just, I don't know a better way to say it, but death and destruction you can't avoid. That, how do you deal with that?
Well, I cry quite a lot, actually. I can't watch the news at the moment. I can't bear what's going on around the world, how much war, how much suffering, how much unnecessary suffering is going on. And if I do watch it, I have a good cry, because that gets it out my system. And then I just send love. I just send love to everyone that's suffering unnecessarily. And I send them, hope of a better future. So I'm trying to resonate something good their way. But if you're talking about anxiety and depression, I've got a new client at the moment, ex-sports person, broke their back, can't be a sports person anymore, and in the depths of depression and grenades of negativity bombing him all night, him unable to sleep as a result, video clips of should have, would have, could have, wouldn't be in this situation now. And so, apart from healing sessions, I've got him to start a new mantra. So whenever he's walking, whenever he's doing anything, he just repeats, "Everything always works out for me," over and over again. And then the other thing I've got him doing is, and people need to realize, negative voices, you put them there, you fed them, you gave them all the ammunition that they need to beat you up. So they've only got so much to say. So what I say to people is, speak to them, ask them to step forward, and ask them to speak up. And after everything they say, "So what?" Because nobody's died. They're just those sentences, those words that they repeat to you just make you feel bad. But you've got friends that love you. You've got family that love you. And really, that this stuff isn't true. It's just been there for a long time. So I asked mine to step forward. Well, I don't have any now, but I spent a long time doing this when I was anxious and depressed. And it's like, step forward. What have you got to say? And it'd be like, you're worthless, you're useless, you should have, you blah, 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 you're an idiot. And each time it spoke, I just said, say what? Say what? Say what? Say what? And then eventually they just stop speaking because they haven't got anything else to say. If you keep practicing that, eventually it just go away. It's quite bizarre, but it works.
There's a motif from law enforcement in the military that puts wolves into the bad character in this. I don't necessarily have anything against wolves, but in this example, they're the bad guys. And it's people are sheep. So you have a society that are just sheep. They're out there doing their things. And then you have the people that look out for society, the sheepdogs, and they're out there protecting the sheep from the predator that would be that's out there. Predators. I mean, you can have the best positive look of everything, and I'm sure it helps. And I'm not saying that condescendingly at all. I do think the positive mental attitude makes things better. But if you have the predatory forces of the world that are there to prey on the sheep, and the sheepdog are watching them, what kind of energy do the sheep give? What kind of energy do the sheepdogs give? And what kind of energy do the wolves give?
Blimey, that's a big one, isn't it? Let me have a think about that. Well, my ex was ex-military, and he suffered from PTSD. And at the time, I wasn't a healer, so I couldn't deal with it, and I really struggled with it. And the main problem seemed to be that, you go into these things, like you say, you're the sheepdogs protecting the sheep. But very often, what is required in order to protect the sheep is things that aren't natural to us as human beings, and seeing other humans and being involved in war, which is humans at their absolute worst, is something that very often people can't clear out of their minds, out of their visions, out of their minds. And it's because energetically, you've been absolutely pounded, absolutely pounded. It's like being run over every single day for a very long period. And I think that particularly PTSD is so layered and so complicated and so unique to each person that it needs a very holistic approach. And I'm working with an ex-NASA rocket scientist engineer who's invented a device called Vibe, which is a vibrational frequency machine that makes no noise. And he's getting really good results with, in this area. I'm working with another inventor who's crossbred 5 different mushrooms and has produced this mushroom powder. And again, that seems to be having really good effects because it affects your messaging. And with PTSD, my understanding, and again, I'm not an expert, people just come to me and I try and help them. It resets your messaging so you don't keep returning to negative things. And it helps your brain redevelop and restructure because the messaging in your body through taking mushrooms has been repaired. So it heals your body in every single way that's required. So I'm all about, finding out what that person's particular journey is and protecting the sheep and finding out where they are now and what it is that they can't cope with and trying not to make it disappear and saying it doesn't matter when somebody's given their service to protect us, the sheep, sounds terrible. But what we want to do is, it's like being abused when you were a child. I deal with a lot of people who've had that in their backgrounds. It happened to you, but it doesn't denote who you are going forward. It happened to you, but it doesn't haunt you anymore. It's just something that happened. And now you're moving forward. And if you look at it, it's just something that happened. And you need to get to a point where, and when I say this to people initially, they almost get quite cross. It's like it's a blessing or a gift that's going to help you do something amazing. And quite a lot of people that I've dealt with in the past who were desperate and haunted by their past activity in the military have now shifted into helping other people get to a better place and not be affected by it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I also think as a sheep, we have no idea what it's like to just not be able to stop. Can't just stop for a cup of tea, can you, when you're in battle? Can't just go, oh, could you hold on a bit? We're a bit tired. To be on the edge, what people give when they give their service, I think needs a bit more recognition and appreciation.
Maybe the answer to it is what you've already said, which is everybody is different. Everybody has their own different frequencies. And as a population, the more people you get, the more you'll have the certain frequencies that tend to hang out together or have like attributes. So that's how you can get to the generalization of society being sheep. But I think from the perspective of the wolves, they could keep a positive frequency, a high energy, and they're out there doing what wolves do, surviving. It's just to the detriment of the sheep, but the sheep have a positive attitude. The wolves have a positive attitude. They're just set against each other in nature. And then you have so then I question, maybe it makes sense because if you have different people in the military, or even sometimes you see it between police and the people they're arresting, we'll call them criminals just to call them criminals for this point, that they go through something tough together. Like the criminals trying to get away, the police are trying to arrest them. Or you have the military that's fighting for one country and the military that's fighting for another, that their frequencies and their positive mental attitudes, they both have, they're just set against each other. And you can recognize the same frequency, but you have a different mission. So you have that brotherhood or sisterhood between enemies that, you're set against each other.
Yeah,
But
and I mean,
it
this is history repeating itself over and over again, isn't it? And I mean, you're not going to like me saying this at all, but haven't men been in charge for a long time while we've been at war over and over and over again? And, in the UK, I mean, we've been invaded by everybody. We're like a warring nation. But, isn't it time we question things as sheep? Is it right? Is it right? Do we support it? Because I think one of the things we've stopped doing since COVID is saying, I'm not very happy about that, actually, and we've got this real lackluster, I can't do anything about it. Well, you can. Social media, just start talking about it, because you can guarantee if you're not happy about something, there'll be a lot of other people that aren't. And or you might discover that you're wrong or get some more information on it and change your opinion. But I think we've got to stop being so rigid about things. And, I say to all the naysayers out there, my mother's one of them. We call her the Doomburger. All this, all immigration, all the other blah, 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 blah. Well, there's nothing I can do about that. So I'm just going to concentrate on me, loving me, making sure I'm all right. And then if I'm really in love with me and happy with myself, other people around me will be happy. And I'll be in a really strong place to help anybody that's not. And that's where I'm at, really. I mean, I do read the news once a week, that I'm completely up to date and don't seem like a complete fool. But I despair at where we are. We're in a terrible place at the moment. Forget climate change. We've got a mental health crisis phenomenon, you know, plague, if you will. And we've got an environmental disaster looming, and we're bombing each other. What on earth is going on? We've got bigger problems.
I think that's a great example of there's people that fall into the sheep category, people that fall into the sheepdog category, and people that fall into the wolves. And it's all the different perception and perspective, because to that person, they might not be that, but to another group, they are that. And the the power of the positive attitude, I agree with, exists, but there's also the reality of nature that is out there in the world that will crush you even if you do have a positive attitude. Like I have a positive attitude that if you do not care about nature, it will crush you, because nature doesn't care about you either. Like if you're sailing out in the ocean or whatever, I don't think nature is there to destroy you. It just doesn't care at all. Like you can be
No,
in harmony with it. You can be in
yeah,
awe of it,
yeah. I mean, the
but
sea will take you out. I was living in Tenerife last year, and it's like great for surfing, but get it wrong, and you're like smashed on the rocks. You know, it doesn't care who you are. It's not prejudiced or favourable in any way whatsoever. But like you say, if you can get in tune with it when you're on your board and you've caught a decent wave and you're coming in, wow, what a great feeling, you know. And I think the other thing, very interesting what you said, you know, we had all the trouble in Northern Ireland, and we were always told that the IRA were terrorists and they were promoted in a certain way. And our British soldiers were over there doing their duty. But later on, I got to meet loads of Irish people who told me that they actually were freedom fighters because of a lot of information that we weren't told. So it is about perspective, but generally, people are protecting what they've got when they feel it's a threat, or somebody is trying to get something that is in their country and a resource that they want. And this is going to become more and more common, I think, as we become, you know, um, as we have less water, as we have less food, as we have more environmental destruction, because as you said, Mother Nature doesn't care. And I think she's a bit cross at the moment.
it's interesting to visualize the energies of people. I think that does help understand other people's perspective, and maybe empathy is its own thought of what visualizing an energy is, to where it's not sympathy where you're feeling sorry for someone, it's putting yourself in their situation or trying to understand what they're feeling if you can't put yourself in their situation. I'm reminded of I think a nature show I was watching sometime that talked about birds and insects pollinating plants, and how they knew not to go back to one for a certain amount of time, like it already had been gone over for the day or whatever. And the show talked about how insects and birds can see colors differently than people. And when you have a plant that has been visited that day, or in the amount of time it takes for the nectar to come back or pollen or whatever, that it gives off a different color. And the insect can see that, or the bird can see that. So they don't go to that one, they go to the next one. And when you look at bees, especially in nature, and you see them go from one flower to another, and you go, I wonder how they know not to go back to this one. It's those things that we can't perceive. And I think there's a lot of that just between people and living things in general, is there people have perceptions that we don't understand or that we don't see. And maybe some people have the ability to feel or see things that other people don't, either because it's a gift, a talent, or something that has been developed through recognizing it. But I have in my life met people and thought they have a good aura. And I'm not a person that sees auras, but I can recall a few times in life where I go, oh, that it's it's like they had an aura, like they stood out from people around them. And is that something in your experience that can be developed, or is it something you just have to pay more attention to be able to develop it, or is it you have it or you don't?
We've all got an aura, a morphogeneric field, as I said earlier, but they'd call it in quantum physics. And you can up the power of that as much as you want. It's all attached to frequency. So it's a decision. I'm going to operate on a high frequency. I'm going to say I love things. I'm going to say nice things to people. And you're right. People will be attracted to you if you're on a high frequency. I can't sit on a train. I mean, I get on a train and I get a huge, great newspaper out because I actually want some quiet. I've only got to put it down for a second, and the person next to me will tell me their life story. And I'm very honoured that somebody would feel that level of intimacy. But I'm obviously giving off a frequency that says I'm open, you can talk to me about anything, and it's fine. But when I was anxious and depressed, that frequency made me fearful. So I had a lovely car, great big Mercedes, and I never really enjoyed driving it because I was always gripping the steering wheel and being anxious. Now when I drive, I've got a Mini Cooper. I whiz about like a rally driver up and down the country lanes, and I enjoy it. I have the sunroof open when it's really cold and put the heating on full blast, put my sunglasses on and pretend I'm in the south of France. It's about just enjoying yourself. And you'll find the higher your frequency, the better things will start happening to you. Over and over again, I say this and people don't believe me, but they will. You know, if you're a lovely, smiley person, you're going to be like a big sunflower. You just attract people to you.
Yeah, I like the idea of the cars and the frequency because that it is a thing made by people. So it has the creativity all imbued in it from people that have crafted it. And then there's something in it that resonates with you when you see it. And you're like, oh, I'd like to look at that car. And then when you drive it, you can feel the next level of, it's not just what it looks like, it's the performance of it. And yeah, I think that's why you can tell a lot by how people dress, what kind of cars they drive. And maybe you can't, it's not always the right thing. I mean, it's not always in line with what they are or their frequency. But if you have a person that is able to get the type of car they want, then I think that matches up pretty good. Like if you see the red sport car person versus the truck person, that it tells you a lot. And maybe it's similar to the flower giving off that different aura, that's just how humans manifest creativity and communicate with each other, because you're communicating with someone you never met. The people that make the car communicating with the customer that drives it, communicating with the people that see it. And that's an
Well,
interesting
how
way to look.
about this? I'm going to throw this into the mix. So you've got a Swiss handmade watch that's been made by hand with intense precision over every single cog and dial that's gone into it. It's been a work of love. Now that is going to have a real frequency. Whereas this horrible thing, not only is we'll talk about electromagnetic frequency in a minute. This has been made by sweating people in a factory, by making them work really long hours, probably polluting the environment, there's nothing really consciously good about this. So this is bad frequency. As well
Hmm.
as that, it's giving off electromagnetic frequency. And you can read about this, it's in the instructions in the tiny, tiny print. And that's effectively radiation. If you're constantly holding it to your ear, you are literally burning your brain. And there's, you know, guys keep it in their top pockets, don't they? A lot of guys are getting cancer there now. A lot of guys keep it in their back pocket. Huge rate in the rise in prostate cancer. I wonder why. So that's my little rant. But the difference between the energies of those two products is going to be very different to, mass produced versus handmade, pride in every single bit of work that went into that watch.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you walk around with pretty much the product of slavery in your pocket, you're using it all the time, many times a day, that's got to be different than a piece of art.
But we do need these, we just need to protect ourselves against them. You can get anti-EMF stickers off the internet and they work. You just slap them on there and you're protected. But, talk into your phone on loudspeaker and you'll be a lot safer. Just
Yeah,
be aware, you know.
we call that talking to your toast because it looks like you.
Yeah. But, I say to my clients, tell me, where's your phone when you go to sleep? Oh, it's plugged in next to my bed. Oh, okay. So it's level to your head while you're sleeping for 8 hours, giving out electromagnetic frequency, which we know is bad for us. Even the World Health Organization have demanded some research into it. There's got to be something not good if they're looking into it. 8 hours right next to your head. And, I never have my phone next to me. When I go to sleep, my laptop's not near me. It's in another room. My phone's in another room. I don't have a TV in my room because I need to sleep and I need the frequency of good quality sleep not to be interrupted by anything else.
Yeah, being a creature of the world and all the ties from it is different than maybe how humanity was meant to live. It's when you start thinking about energies.
Yeah, well, just think about how good you feel when you're by a waterfall. Think about how good you feel when you're in a forest. I mean, different people like different places. I've got friends that don't like forests. I love being by the sea. I love to sit and watch the ocean. It gives me something back. And I think, if you think about, we are completely lost, quite frankly. I live in an agricultural area that's being invaded by outsiders, frankly. They're complaining about things like cows crossing the village green at 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, sorry, we've been milking them at 5 o'clock in the morning for longer than you've been here. And, moaning about harvesting going on in the middle of the night when it's really hot. Well, we've got flint in our soil, and if metal strikes that during a hot day, the whole combine harvester could blow up. So again, we're terribly sorry, but we're an agricultural area. We were here. We have respect for nature. We don't want wildfires happening on our land, And these outsiders, these townies, and I'm not being horrid, they're lovely people, lots of them add huge value to our villages. And bring business into the area, and we're very grateful. But they're so detached from nature, and it's just shocking.
I guess there is a lot said to the love-hate relationships of a lot of things that even keeping the positive attitude about it, there's still I wonder if the universe is balanced, that as positive of energy as you put out, is there the negative being put out somewhere else?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've already talked about the news, haven't we, and the press. I mean, they're not. Have you picked up a newspaper really and recently and thought, my goodness, I really enjoyed reading that. It really made me feel good. That's all control. Be afraid, be afraid. And all this oh, the bank's this and the bank's that. And, the fact that the banksters, ripped us all off through mortgages and nobody was ever held to account, makes us all feel like we don't count and like we've got no control. But actually, you have. There's lots of things that you can do to make sure that you're safe, to make sure that you are in control. And when you stop thinking that you're not and just start taking action, then things change. We've got to stop living in fear and we've got to stop being angry about things because most things are outside of our control and there's nothing we can do about it. So, what's the point of wasting that energy when we've already? Let me tell you about this amazing experiment. I think it's it's a French experiment. I think you can Google this and you'll find it. Guy took 2 glasses of water, wrote love on one and hate on the other. And for a week, every morning, he looked at one and gave it words of love. You're beautiful water, you're fresh, you're delicious, I love you, you're divine. And the other one, he was like, I hate you, you're disgusting, you're horrible, you stink. Da, da, da. Anyway, what happened was the glass of water that was given love stayed fresh, and the glass of water that was given hate became rancid. Now we're 70% water. What are we doing to ourselves if we are deciding to utilize words of hatred? I tell people off all the time, be immaculate with your words. It says this in the Bible. Words are creation. So create good stuff because the words of hate create more bad stuff.
That sounds like something a French person would do. Just passing by the window, watching him or her curse at the water in the morning. When you were on your podcast, how did you decide to start podcasting?
Well, when you're a healer and you're tuned in, sometimes you wake up in the morning and you just get a message. So I've got quite a stroppy guide that's quite shouty. And if I'm not paying attention, when I wake up in the morning, it's like, how many times do I need to tell you? You need to start a bloody podcast. And it's like, oh, sorry, I swore then. I do apologise to your viewers. But that's how she speaks to me. And it's like, all of a sudden, stuff will start popping up on my email or Instagram or something that's directing me to do it. And I was on Clubhouse chatting about something, and somebody messaged me and said, "Why don't you do a podcast? Because I really like what you've got to say. I mean, you're not wafting sage about being woo-woo. You're quite direct, and you explain things in ways that are quite easy to understand and put into practice. None of this is difficult. We're just really resistant to it."
Is bloody considered a swear word in Britain?
Yes, it is.
Oh. That gives a new view of that. Like, so when somebody says that, they're cursing.
Yeah. But it's more like an expression. And I'm from London, and everyone loves the F word. It's like, to tell you how big something was, how appalled they are, how happy they are, how delighted they are, how, I don't know. It tends to cover everything, and every other word, from proper Cockney Londoners will have that in it because it shortcuts the need for lots of other words. So Brits might appear incredibly polite, but actually we do swear quite a lot.
Okay. So with the podcast then, what equipment did you start with after you decided you were going to do it?
Well, I bought a webcam, which I think it cost about $30. I initially had a microphone that cost about $30. I've got very lucky, I've got an Apple MacBook, so that made life very easy. I initially started on E360 TV, and went out on that and YouTube and what have you. And it was great. And I was really blessed. I mean, I was terrified about asking people to be on it, and I was terrified of doing it. My first, I mean, if you go back, and my first interview is with Greg Becker, who's amazing. Um, He's the producer and director of the Living Matrix film. And if you want to find out about frequency, watch that. I mean, he's an absolute genius. And I'm awful. I spend all my time going, it's amazing, fantastic, and I'm really unprepared, or and I look really amateur. And I just watched it back and I thought, oh, do you know what? Everyone started here. And a friend of mine sent me a video of somebody who's really famous and polished. I won't say who it is. And said, look at this interview of them in like 1997. And they just sounded like an idiot. And they just went, there's hope, darling. Don't worry, keep at it. And I thought, yeah, well, I'll just have a go, really. I'm not bothered what people think about me. I'm a bit Marmite anyway. You either like me or you don't. And it's the same with my clients. I say to them, I'm really straight talking. Some people call me the gangster healer because I'm like, I won't take any excuses. If you decide to heal, you've got to do the work yourself. You've got to face up to things and face things down. Take ownership for things and move forward. So,
How'd you decide the format for your podcast?
Generally, I have a pre-interview with people that I'm interested in, and we just sort of have a chat, and it'll just come together. Whatever their passion is that they want to talk about, that fits into frequency, and then we'll just decide that we're going to have a chat around that. I might make a few notes, and then we just meet up and have a chat. And I just find that generally, I always say to people, I have 4 questions that are fallbacks if I have somebody really difficult that I can, pull back to at any time if they've gone off on a tangent. But generally, I'll be lucky if I get, 1 or 2 questions popped, because once people start talking about their passion, it's really lovely, and it really does raise your frequency. I don't want to switch that off, so I try not to be too planned, really. What about you? Do you plan yours, or do you just like to have a chat?
It's conversational, and I think about the conversation before I have it. So it's like I have an outline of, if I'm on different topics, of things that I think about when I think about that topic, that doesn't have anything to do about a podcast or a conversation. It's just what I think about. So that's basically what the podcast is me just talking to somebody else that I think is interested in the same thing, and trying to figure out what they know and see what I think about it. And for
Yeah.
me, podcasting is the conversation. Like, you could watch it or listen to it, and it's like you're in the room having the conversation with them as the listener. That's how I listen to podcasts. And you don't get to say anything because you're watching somebody else do it, but it's like you're in a conversation. So that's why I enjoy it, maybe better than regular TV show. Like, I don't watch much TV because of that. But yeah, that's my preparation for it, is I think about what I would talk to a person who is a spiritual healer about. What questions would I have about it? And then that's what I think, oh, okay, well, I might ask this, or this, but it's not like I have questions written out, more of just ideas of what I'd be interested in finding out about.
Yeah, I always think of it as like, if I met someone down the pub, and you do this sort of like, what's your name? What do you do? And you'd go, oh, tell me about this. Wow, that must be interesting. That sort of chat, I think. I try and think about questions that, other people might want answered, really. And,
Mm-hmm.
like I interviewed Harvey Wizard. He delighted in telling me that his wife was 30 years younger than him. And I just had to ask because I thought everybody's going to ask. I said, did it never cross your mind that she might be a bit of a gold digger? And he said, no, it's all right, Vanessa. I've been married to 3 gold diggers already. She's really genuine. She's never asked me for, even when I said, let me buy you a wedding present, you can have anything. I'm a multi-millionaire. She said, I'd really like a new Kindle and a pair of glasses because I hate reading. She could have said, I don't know, like a 5-story mansion with a swimming pool, but that was it. That was all she wanted. I thought it was rather lovely, really.
Yeah, she's playing the long game, but yeah, it's how do you find people to be on your podcast? How do you book guests? I guess is the way to say it.
They tend to find me, to be honest with you. I'm a bit bombarded at the moment. I've had to employ somebody to email them all back because I'm busy healing and working on different things. And I've just been really lucky. Really interesting people have messaged me and said, please can I come on your podcast? And we've met, as I said, on our sort of pre-interview thing. And I've just thought, gosh, you're really interesting. Let's have a chat and let's continue this chat, really, is what it generally is. And they just come along. It's really strange how if I think, I'd really like to interview a rocket scientist, I think that'd be quite interesting. Mine will just pop up within the next couple of days. It's quite bizarre.
Do you think we live in a simulation then?
Oh, what you mean? Like, are we in the Matrix? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
In a way, I watched Westworld recently, and the first time I watched it, I couldn't really get into it. I don't know why I wasn't in the right headspace. And I watched it again, and I thought, yeah, this is like a giant theme park sometimes. And, maybe we are just robots that just keep being reprogrammed and pop back in. And, there was a lot in that resonated with me. And if that is the case, what's your oyster, really, isn't it? You're just going to come back anyway, so you might as well enjoy yourself.
Yeah, I think if we're in a simulation, which I think we are, that it's just another word for reality. I mean, it explains so much. It answers so many questions that people argue about, like, was the universe created? Is it intelligent design? All that. Yeah, it is. If you live in a simulation, it is. But you could also just take out simulation and just say reality. And if you don't want to think of it as a simulation, then okay, what is reality if not a simulation? If we think that we're linked to something else somewhere else, not here right now, and we're blocked from knowing everything, then what's the difference of that versus you playing some sort of really immersive, what we would call a game, but then that's just words. I mean, it's reality, simulation, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Once you start thinking like that, and what's the stuff that we can't see in between everything? What is it? What's it doing? In between my fingers, what's that stuff doing?
Yeah.
And also other dimensions. Like the same thing is happening. That there's another one of me in another dimension doing something quite similar with different outcomes. I mean, that's quite a strange one to start thinking about. And I'm really interested in ancient history. And you look at some of the creations, there's a 10,000-year-old ruins of a temple, I think it is, in a desert in Africa. They're laser cut. Every stone is laser cut. Absolute, on the money. Each angle. 10,000 years old. You start looking at Sanskrit and things like that and start thinking about that in terms of how they're describing balls of fire coming to the earth. Could that be a spaceship? You look at Mayan, what do you call it, cartography, where it looks like some of their gods are actually in a spaceship. And how did they get all these huge blocks from the top of these mountains that are 30 meters up to a coral reef in the Philippines, and they're all laser cut, and they had an irrigation system that's phenomenal. And I can't remember what it's called. It's like Plong something or other. And but they've carbon dated it, and it's over 12,000 years old. How did that stuff happen? There has to be more, doesn't there? And I live in East Anglia, and we have UFO sightings all the time.
Yeah. There's so much I don't think we realize, and we're so closed off, some people so closed off to thinking about it that it just doesn't occur to them. So yeah, I think a lot of it is explained that we're in a designed thing. I mean, you could, as I said before, you could just say it, not say simulation, and explain what a simulation is. And someone that's trying to trace religion or whatever could say, yeah, that's it, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, I'm just describing a simulation, so it makes sense. I'm not aggravated by the idea that God is some sort of programmer that created this thing. That's fine with me. I mean, if you knew you're in a simulation, what are you going to do anyway? You're still, why are you here? You're here for a reason. Is it you're just traveling to some star system or somewhere, and this is just keeping your mind fresh? Are you a prisoner somewhere, and this is how they're invading your mind to figure out something they want to know? Is it a place where you're supposed to gain perspective and experience? Because if you were a part of something else, or a part of this larger whole, that you wouldn't have these individual little nuanced subtle differences of feelings and the way things happen. Yeah, I think
I mean, yeah,
that's
and it's like
valid.
ghosts, isn't it? Like I've lived in a house with a ghost, and every people get take it ridiculous. I mean, like, come and stay, come and stay, and I'll show you. Midnight on the dot, this woman appears and walks through a wall. And once people have seen it, they believe me. Well, what is that? It didn't scare me. I wanted it to communicate with me. I was there for weeks, going, "Hi, who are you?
Mm.
Speak to me." And we didn't have any of those fantastic machines that they have on ghost busting shows now, where you can record it and play it back and it sounds like they're speaking. But what's all that about? You know, why can some people see dead people? Why can they give you messages from your parents that have passed that are so accurate that nobody else would know? I'll give you an example. A friend of mine is a great clairvoyant, and I was in Florida staying with a friend of mine whose dad's got dementia. We desperately needed to find a black box that had all the legal documents in so that we could secure his estate and make sure that, he was safe for his medical care. Anyway, she drove over, bless her, 3 hours it took her, and she walked in the house and she said, "It's not," she just looked at my friend and she said, "It's not here. It's in the other house in Connecticut." And she'd never met my friend before. How does she know that?
Hmm.
How does that work? She can't tell you how it works. She'll just get messages, and she gives them to people, and they're right. So it's weird, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how my stuff works. All I know is I've been taught a method, and when I practice it on people, it has amazing effects. But I don't know how it works.
Yeah, the idea of the quantum particle being entangled with another particle great distance away, and then one thing happens to one, it happens to the other. That's a pretty good explanation, I think, like a starting point to understand what our existence is. Like, we're tied to something else. Like, we're a part of either a whole that everything is a part of, or we're a part of, like, we're playing a video game and there's an us somewhere else that's just in this reality right now, and it just seems like this is all there is, but really there's you that's outside of it. And then maybe that is encapsulated inside of a you that is also a you inside of that. And really, if you go back far enough, everything is one and connected. And that would explain to me why we're here, that it is for the perspective and the experience. Because if you are a part of one all-powerful thing of everything together, then how would you ever understand what it's like to feel powerless, to be victimized, to feel joy, love, sadness, all those things that you feel in this existence, in this simulation, in this whatever you want to call it, that that's the reason for it, is so you can have that experience and then you take that back to whatever it is that's the all-powerful thing.
Yeah, I think that some of that makes, who knows? Who knows? I mean, we're having a conversation, we're unraveling it as we go. I'm really loving your ideas. I mean, you're touching things I haven't thought about. It's like, maybe. But somebody said, another healer that I'm speaking to recently said, you've got to think of it like, and she said, there's so many hints in religion. She said, your DNA is the father, everything that's gone before you, the son, who you are, you're here right now, the product of all of that, and the Holy Ghost, which is your ability to create whatever you want once you switch into it. That's the creation element. So, what every person that you've ever been related to through time is in your DNA, and you're here right now. It's like, what are you going to do with that? What are you, if you can find out, we do something called the Akashic Records reading, where we go up to the Akashic Records, which they've proved exists now in quantum physics, which is like a compendium, a library of everything that's ever happened in the universe and every life you've ever lived. And we call down our clients' records in order to be able to work on them really effectively. And we're able to look at what their divine blueprint is. So, like, who is the real you? It's all made up of 8 energy centers, but it's a bit like a barcode in lots of different percentages. I mean, it goes on into millennia, but we could say we'll get it down to 35% this, 25% that. And I'll show you what your gifts are, what your passions are. And if you follow them, how you'll be in alignment and in flow. So I'll give you an example. I had a client that was a surgeon, one of the top 4 in his particular area of expertise. Been married 5 times, desperately unhappy, burnt out, miserable. Almost suicidal. He was so miserable. Anyway, we looked at his Akashic records and his divine soul blueprint, and he shouldn't have been a surgeon at all. Should have been an artist. His creativity, communication, that was his main energy center. And the reason he'd been able to be a doctor and a surgeon was because he was under that. He was a 7th energy center, which is like really fine-tuned intelligence, really, and then under that he was wisdom. So he had enough of those top 3 elements to be able to be a top surgeon. And I said to him, this is going to sound really weird, but I feel like you should have been an artist. He said, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. I come from a long family. Everyone's in the medical profession. And when I said I wanted to go to art school, they asked me if I was gay. So I became a surgeon. And I said, well, you're not your authentic self. So you've just been attracting the wrong women to you, women who want to be married to a surgeon. They're not the right women for you. No wonder you've been married 5 times. You've got enough money. What you need to do is pack your job in, take a sabbatical, and paint. So he did this, got a beach house, painted. Walking on the beach one day, bumps into a friend of his from school, owns an art gallery in New York. Goes around to his place, have a look at his art. He's a bit nervous. Guy loves it. Puts on an art exhibition, sells everything. That art exhibition, he meets a really hippie girl who he'd never normally look at, falls madly in love with her, and is the happiest he's ever been. Now he's fulfilling his purpose. Now he's, enjoying his gifts, and he's creating what he should be creating. We saved millions of people's lives, but that wasn't his true purpose. It never made him feel good. Can you imagine that? Save someone's life doesn't make you feel good.
I like the idea of using it to match up with a person. Like if you're looking for that, especially if you've been through that many relationships or divorced 5 times, I think you said that, yeah, it it helps to match up the personalities there. But for a person that's an artist at heart or in their past, to be a surgeon, I think could be one of those things that the world was just like, hey, this is if you look at it like a video game, oversimplification, that when you're outside of this, that you get to think you're picking the game now and you're setting all the things you want to do. And you're like, okay, well, normally I do this artist stuff, but I want to try being a doctor. So I'm going to set this life up on the trajectory of being a doctor. So you can mix in as much predetermination or destiny or whatever you want in the idea of fixing this reality if it's like a video game. Again, oversimplification. And you're programming it for your experience because you're thinking, I want to know what it's like to be a doctor because I've always been this artist character in all these realities that I've been in, all these lives I've lived. So I think the idea that if somebody came to you and said, I don't feel like I'm doing what I should, then maybe it's not what you've always done, but it's a thing that somehow you decided you wanted to do. You wanted this experience. So now you're into it. You don't match up with these other people that want to be with a doctor. You match up with these people that want to be with an artist. So on the interpersonal relationship side, that's excellent to know because you do meet the hippie and you're happy. But
Yeah.
you can also be happy with that gained experience of what it's like to be an artist. And I've talked, or a doctor, I've talked to a couple doctors on the podcast that are also artists after they retired, and it fit in nicely. And looking at their work, they couldn't have made the art they did if they weren't the surgeon because
Yeah.
it's so informed on like their art over their understanding of the human body, of the heart, or whatever that you're putting into it. So maybe that was in the recipe of this reality for them to be able to get to that new part of art. I
Yeah.
don't
And I
know.
mean, people say to me, how can you, what a weird combination of things that you've done in your life. I started off in the fashion industry. I was a buyer at Harrods. I then went and worked in cosmetics. I went from that to the building industry, to being on building sites, doing interior design. People think it's all fluffy and choosing wallpaper and carpets. No, it's being on, if you're a proper interior designer, it's being on site with the builders with a hard hat on in all the cold weather, making sure it happens on time and in budget. And then I went into working in infrared technology. And people say, how can you just bat like that? And I'm a seventh energy center. I get bored really quickly. Once I can do something, it's like, what's next? And in the past, my ex-husband, talking about being with the wrong person, used to say to me, you're never satisfied. I never wanted to go back to the same place on holiday. I wanted to go somewhere new. And he wanted to go back to the same place on the same golf course. Boring. So, it's like when you're aware of who you are at, a deep down level, then you can step forward and be excited about the things that light you up. And that gives you the power to fight against, guys that say, well, we've all been in the military. We expect you to go and, or I've got a friend, his whole family have been in the SAS. And the expectation was that he would. He's a film producer. It's the last thing he wanted to do was go and fight, but they're all really tough. And the expectation was that he would do it. I think if he hadn't landed a really fantastic job working on an amazing film, he'd have ended up in the military. He wouldn't
It's
have had the
interesting.
argument, he would have been able to say, Yeah, well, I would, but I'm actually going to be working on this, which is amazing. You can't let me miss this opportunity. And that kept him on the right sort of trajectory, really.
When thinking about having different lives or multiple experiences of reality, I, I find more comfort in that than anything else, because then I can look at what I'm doing now and think, okay, this is what I'm doing now. And I might have a chance to do those other things. I might have already done those other things. So I think it helps me stay focused on what I'm trying to accomplish or what I'm doing. Like, if you were so much that you wanted to try so many different things and you turned out never really, and maybe you have a life like that where you try a bunch of different things because you're trying to figure out what you want to do with the next one. So when you look at existence like that, like it's collecting those experiences and perspectives, I find it more comforting than anything else. But I can see how it would be depressing if you were in a bad state. But even then, I haven't been in terrible states. I mean, I've had my low times and high times like anyone else, but I would still think that the experience helps you deal with the low times with a different perspective, where you can appreciate it and say, what am I supposed to be getting out of this? Like, maybe it makes it a little better because of the positive mental attitude, but if you can't walk or you're infirmed in some way, then I guess you gotta reflect on it and see what you can still do. I don't know.
Well, when I couldn't walk, I thought, and they told me that I'd probably end up in a wheelchair, and I'd take all these dreadful drugs that would make me really ill. Um, I decided that I'd read all these books on how your body could heal yourself, and that's what my body was going to damn well do. And every day, I imagined doing a cartwheel because I used to be a gymnast, and I used to just imagine it for 15 minutes every day. And at the end of it used to make me cry because I couldn't even hardly move or lift a cup. But eventually, I started to get better because my body, my mind was telling my body she can do a cartwheel, she will get better. And I interviewed Barry Shaw, who's the ambassador of joy. He's paraplegic, and he has made a recovery. I mean, he can't walk without assistance, but he was told he'd never be able to move ever. And, check his Instagram out. He's standing, he's swimming, he's doing amazing things. So, you know, even when the worst things happen, you can improve things. I truly, truly believe that. Listen, I hate to be rude, but I have another meeting in six
Okay.
minutes.
No problem. No problem. All right. Thank you very much for being on. Your social media things, your website, your Facebook, and your Instagram, I have the links for in the show notes. So anybody that watches this can go there and check those out directly, which I recommend.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And can I just point out that there are two Vanessa Elstons, and I am not the vicar of the London church. I'm the other one.
Okay. It's a good, I have the right ones.
That's good.
Thank you very much for your time. And I'll talk to you in a second after this, the closing, but thank you very much for your time.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
All right.